What is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show, episode 55. The date is Wednesday, October 16th. We'll call this the gut wrenching Links Loss edition. I'm Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, did you see the Sabrina 3 from
Way downtown.
way downtown?
Yeah, it was funny because right before her first three, my son says, "Has she done anything all series?" And then she hits the first three, and then she hits the dagger three, and
Brutal.
it's a bummer. I mean, but they've been good games so
Yeah,
far. It's
no
been,
kidding.
and so that I mean, I don't think you feel like you're out of it. You just got to make shots, and you get that big lead, and it's disheartening. But that's how they won the first game, was the exact opposite. So
Yep.
gotta win two more. I mean, you gotta get three. It doesn't matter what order you get them in. You just gotta get them.
There you go. Optimist Jeremy. And yeah, as you said, dude, 2 out of the 3 games have been absolutely unbelievable. So hope for a better outcome on Friday. Since we last spoke, not much in the way of Twins news. Only, the Polats are exploring selling the entire organization. That's crazy, dude, because we spent time last week talking about Twins TV is finally here. We can cut the cord. That feels that feels like really good news. Everyone's excited about that. After a really deflating end to the season. So, did you see this coming? Was this on your radar at all that the Polats might sell?
Not even a little bit. And I don't know why it would have been. It's just that it seems weird. Like, and the verbiage of exploring selling,
Yeah,
is that what people do now? Like,
I
we're
think it
gonna
is what people do because the Learners did that with the Nationals, right? And they ended up not selling. I think whoever owns the Angels, I forget, they had similar phraseology in their statements and ended up not selling, which I don't think is going to be the case with the Polettes, it sounds like. But
so who's going to be like in the market? Like, I feel like the Timberwolves thing, like A-Rod, right? I mean, he's a baseball guy. I feel like
right,
that would make sense. And
I
they're
don't
going
think but he doesn't have enough money for the Timberwolves, let alone also the Twins, right?
no, but if the arbitration goes through and they don't get it,
Oh, I
right?
see. Like as a
They have,
pivot purchase, you mean?
right. And I
Yeah,
mean, and I just like with the Tom Brady thing. Does A-Rod, could he probably couldn't own an MLB team and also work
mm-hmm.
for Fox or whoever he works for.
Yep.
Um, so that's weird. I mean, to have two major teams in your marketplace in transition, and the thing is, like, I saw the White Sox, same deal, right? Exploring.
Well, I don't know how. Yeah, sure. I don't know how much I'm buying that one based on who the reported buyers are. They're a group that has put together very unserious proposals for teams before, from what I read. But let me ask you this: um, do you think the Twins are an attractive proposition for a prospective buyer? Right, because the timing of this all seems very strange. The TV announcement was made. Um, said in the statement, I think they've been kind of exploring this or thinking about it or planning for it since the summer. So they knew how the revenue landscape was shaping up. They knew how the TV situation was going to unfold. It still seems odd timing to me to announce it the day after you announce Twins TV and announce it in the middle of the playoffs, when MLB wants people focused on action on the field. So, does the timing strike you as odd? Do you think the Twins are an attractive proposition to a buyer?
I mean, I don't think that there are many unattractive teams, right? You're trying to make money, and I feel like every team is capable of making you money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't feel like they're like when you trade or when you move something, you're trying to suck every ounce of value out of it, right? And I feel like this is wasn't great because the value isn't the highest that it could possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do think, I mean, if you have money and you want to invest it and make money, baseball teams, football teams, basketball teams, like there's a reason that people pay billions of dollars because it is going to make you money. The Twins will make money for the owner. It might take a second to get there. It might require payroll to go down first, but the businessmen will make business decisions to make their business money, and that's kind of what the Pohlads have done without necessarily investing more into the team, right? I think Gleeman's the headline of Gleeman's thing, right? They could have been rich,
Yeah, great line.
But instead they chose to be slightly richer and loathed. And that's exactly what it is, right? You could have X billion dollars and people will love what you're doing, or you could have X billion dollars minus $1 billion and people hate you. Like the dude for the Mets, like throw all the money.
Steve Cohen, yeah.
He's still got the money and he's got a team in the NLCS.
So let me ask you this then, because my immediate gut reaction, right, was, and people yelled at me for this, was I'm not automatically assuming that this is going to be good news. And I would add on to that by clarifying this should be good news, right? But I also don't want to just blindly assume that the next owner is going to spend more money, is going to be more competent, is going to be more invested in creating a winning product. That's what I hope for, and that's what I am cautiously optimistic for. What is your sense of optimism? And obviously that's kind of going to be a blind answer, right? Because we have no idea about any prospective buyers. But I do think one thing that we maybe kind of over dilute ourselves into with the teams that we follow is that our owner is by far the worst. And I think that's so far from true about the Pohlads, who I don't think are great owners, but I also think there's far, far worse. So I'm curious what your sense of optimism is, or where your head's at in terms of, how much you couch this as good news versus just news, and we need to wait and see.
Well, I think the thing that makes it bad news, could make any franchise bad news, is the potential to move.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I don't think there's danger in that. Target Field is relatively new. There are multiple teams with far worse stadium issues that Major League Baseball look at first. Yep. We're talking expansion.
Yep.
Right, to get to 32. So I don't necessarily think it's like necessary to be cautiously optimistic, because I think there's a better chance that things are going to be better than they are worse. Pohlads are going to sell to the highest bidders, and that means that whoever it is going to have more money than the people that don't necessarily get it. It's hard because we don't know, but I do think that it'll be in better hands once this is all said and done.
What are you setting as the over-under for the final sale price, assuming that this gets done in a reasonable amount of time, right? And so I don't even know what a reasonable amount of time is. Let's call it the next year.
And right? I don't even know what reasonable prices are with baseball teams. Like, what was the last baseball team to sell?
I think so. So the Orioles were, right. The Mets sold for a lot. The Orioles, I want to say, I think we're for like mid-market teams, we're looking at like between 1 and 2 billion. I was gonna say 1.3 or 1.4 would be my guess for the Twins, but around $1.5 billion, I think.
So the Orioles were sold for 1.725 in 2023.
Okay.
The team is now valued at 1.73 billion. The Mets were sold for 2.75 billion. I would guess.
I can't even process that number.
I'm curious what the Twins' current value is.
I think it's around 1.4 or 1.5.
So I would guess it will sell for a little bit more than that. So I'm going to say 1.65.
Okay. All right. Heard it here first. We will, of course, continue to dig into that as we get more news. I do kind of think we're going to get like a dead period there now. Now that that news has been announced, I don't
It's
think
always
we're
going to
going
be a dead period all winter.
to. Yeah, yeah, you're telling me. But luckily, we got guests lined up, and we'll drop those names at the end of this episode. Before we do that, dude, I feel like you might be sick of this by now. We're in like Groundhog Day of like farm system review, but we got through 3 parts, and there was just too many guys that we hadn't talked about. And it's a mixture of either kind of new guys or like lottery ticket guys. And I feel like those are conversations we haven't had as much on this show in the last 12 plus months that we've been doing it. And so we're going to dig into like 5 or 6 more guys. We'll mention a good amount more names and go through our process of kind of recapping their season, right? So dig into some numbers, do a like stock up, stock down, stock the same, and then try and ask some relevant questions about what lies ahead and what's important for them as prospects moving into 2025. Ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So I'm going to give a caveat before we dig into the guys. I organize this a little bit differently, and so there's some players who are kind of bucketed together as like the DSL guys, or some guys are like the just played in the States for the first time guys, and we'll try and highlight what those are. I'll also say that the vast majority of college bats from the 2024 draft we left off this list. So like Kadeem Jow, Jaime Ferrer, Caden Kendall, Peyton Carr, Jay Thomason. The Twins took maybe like a disproportionate number of bats in the 2024 draft. We're not going to dig into all those guys today. We are going to dig into one of them, and that's going to be our jumping off point because with the 60th pick, the Twins took Billy Amick, who they're actually tied to much, much higher than that with one of their first 2 picks. Third baseman, kind of, from the national champion Tennessee Volunteers, 21 years old. In his debut, he started off in Fort Myers, hit 222, 351, 413. That's good for a 763 OPS. Struck out 19.5% of the time, walked 15.6%. All the approach stuff, actually, because I remember we talked about him, Jeremy, and I was like, oh, I don't know, like these initial numbers are looking kind of a little worrying. He really leveled out and took off a little bit in the last few weeks of the season. 70% contact rate, 25% chase, 18% end zone whiff. That's all kind of within normal range for the level. Hits the ball really hard, 104 mile per hour, 90th exit velocity, and a expected WOBA of getting towards 350. So a solid enough start for Amick. Curious now that we've had some time, right, to reflect on that. I feel like you and I were both like absolutely not in on him at 21 or even 33. Right. How do you feel about him now that a little time's elapsed? You've seen a little bit of the numbers at low A. How do you feel about him in terms of like a value play at 60th overall?
Yeah, I think we probably feel pretty similar because it was a guy that we weren't necessarily like, oh, just don't draft him. It was like, ooh, it would be a reach at 21. Mm-hmm. And so the type of player that he is like the ceiling is high, the value, the floor is low. Where he falls is going to be somewhere in the middle. To me, it's like a Brandon Whitaker type.
Yeah.
Only a little bit older, has tons of power, probably a little bit less defensive ability to play around the diamond. He's playing mostly first and third. I think he's probably going to end up in a corner. But you bet on the power. You know you're going to get swing and miss when you have that. And he only played 18 games. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into those stats anyway. But I do think the expectation would have been, at least in my opinion, you go from the SEC.
You hold
where you're killing it and you're playing with Christian Moore, right? And then you go to low A baseball and you're okay, right? Like he should have been better, but it's hard to draw any huge conclusions
For sure.
when you have 63 at bats, 77
Yeah.
plate appearances. And so I would like to think like Cedar Rapids next year to start, and he's gonna swing and miss, but
Mhm.
you gotta, 6 extra base hits. Like his slug was 413, so I just think there's got to be more there. But he just came off of playing 65 games, so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna put a lot of stock into that. I do like just that there's upside there, and you add him in where you're adding him in to a third base depth where it's like there's plenty of third basemen. If he ends up in a corner and his bat plays, they'll find room for him. But what to make out of the season? There's not a ton. And he's a right-handed bat, and then the Twins don't have a ton of those. So I like the pick at 60, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that. I've now like ascribed all of these guys' numbers to end of longest baseball season of your life fatigue, and so almost taking an approach of like, let's see how 2025 goes, and agree with you. Kind of hope for an aggressive assignment there.
Let me ask you this question though.
Mhm.
On the MLB Pipeline rankings, they have him ahead of both CJ Culpepper and Corey Lewis.
Not for me.
Yeah, me neither.
Neither.
And I would put him below that. Maybe not significantly below that, but Olivar, Winokur is 16. Like there's a bunch of dudes that I would have ahead of him.
Yeah.
That they have him as high at 11.
Yeah, I think the teens for me, and like he is a SEC slugger of good caliber coming off a great season, right? And I do actually think there are some things to be encouraged about here. Like some of these numbers in his approach, like contact chase, end zone whiff, is actually a little better than his SEC performance, and so that's always encouraging. His contact percentage in college play was like 67, 66%. That was one of the kind of orange flags coming into the draft process for him. And we'll get here because we'll do an off-season pod ranking or kind of dual ranking side by side. I have a very difficult time differentiating between guys in the teens and almost find it a useless exercise and would rather say, here's the guys that fall under this bucket, and he's in there, as opposed to saying I place Amick ahead of Winokur, ahead of Olivar, etc., etc. I find that a very challenging thought exercise.
I mean, you'd place him in the same bucket as Winokur and Olivar, right?
Yeah, for sure. So Amick, stock up, stock down, stock the same, and maybe that's even an unfair question for him because, as you said, what was it, 18 games, 19 games, 60-something plate appearances. Any strong opinions about his end of year stock?
I think I think I would say it's the same as when they drafted him.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't that I didn't have belief in him. It was just like in the first round. I think the stock went up the further he dropped down the board, right? Because the expectations would be lower. So I'm okay with the pick. I'm okay with how he performed. Let's see a semi-aggressive placement this next year, and how he performs, and hopefully he hits for power in Cedar Rapids and can work his way up to Wichita. And then I would say, great, you're 22 years old and you're 2 promotions away from the major leagues.
Yep. All those 3 guys for me, Culpepper, Amick, and DeBarge. Let's revisit them next June. Then I think we can have a real conversation about where they are and how they're doing. Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk next about Ricardo Olivar. He is a guy who we just have not spoken about on this podcast that much. Wrote about him before this season, actually, as one of the more underrated Twins prospects over at Twins Daily. Just some information, just kind of a summary here of his season and info on him as a prospect in general. He is a 23-year-old positionless bat. He has played plenty of catcher. He has played in the outfield. I do not believe the reports on the defense are particularly good at either position. He was incredible at AA to start this season. I'm going to give you his combined numbers across the whole year. And then I think what you're going to point out probably is actually his numbers at AA were not good at all. And he struggled significantly when he went up. So um, we'll talk about that in a second. But combined across high A Cedar Rapids and Wichita, he hit 275, 381, 441. That's good for 822 OPS. Struck out 20% of the time, walked 14% of the time, 75% contact rate. That's just really good across the board. I'm kind of sneaky hoping you have his numbers after he got to Wichita because it was not cute, I think. But I could be
220,
misremembering.
224,
Mm-hmm.
325, 299 slug,
Ooh.
683 OPS.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess here's my thought when I see something like that. Like, dude had a really good year at Cedar Rapids. Played the entire year in 2023 at Fort Myers.
Yep.
And like for me, the idea of having a second consecutive really good year and then sending him to the off season, like, do you have the mindset where it's like, man, they wouldn't even promote me, and then not put in the time, like, because you have this sense of belonging, or I was too good for that level, versus let's give you this cameo in the last month. You're starting at Wichita either way.
Yep.
And now it's like you saw what it was like. You saw that it's difficult. Does your mindset in the winter months change because you realize that you have to take this step? And so that's why I don't mind when guys struggle, because I think it helps with that motivation factor over the winter. 22 at AA, like he was young, and the value's all in the bat, and so I think even with that bad month, you can have those and still have really good years. And so 275, 381, 441 with an 823 OPS, even with that bad month after promotion. Like, I think he's put himself onto the map, and now it's up to him as to how well he's going to do in these last two levels.
Certainly, and I think we're going to align here when we get to the stock up, stock down, stock the same question. This off season and into next season is going to be pivotal, right? Because I think, like, without being unkind, the defensive reports has been that he's kind of a butcher everywhere, and so the bat is really going to need to play well. And I also think, to your point about, like, you don't mind when guys struggle, I do think we tend to overreact to that, right? And say, oh, they got promoted and it was difficult. Well, yeah, like, you're playing against better players. Of course it's difficult, but we tend to automatically, I think, just then bucket that guy as like, oh, well, couldn't hack it at AA. Whereas, to your point, he gets a mulligan at AA next season. And similar to the college guys we were talking about from the 2024 draft, if we revisit in July and his slug is 214, then it's a little bit more of a valid concern. So how do you weigh then his challenging end of the season at AA and his season overall? Is he a stock up, stock down, or stock the same guy for you?
Yeah, stock up, just from the perspective of I don't know that I had him. I mean, he would have been like a top 30 guy at the beginning of the year, and now I would put him in that bucket that we talked about before, right? Somewhere in the teens, and it's a good organization as far as the depth goes. It's weird to me that when you look at where he's played, like, it's catcher, left field, DH.
They're really trying to find him a spot.
But not even like trying other spots. He played 3 games in center field in 2023 and played 4 games at second base in 2022 and some games in center field. Like, he's not. Oh, I guess there's some right field in there too. But, like, how about anything on the dirt? Like, could you see any time at third? Could you see any time at second?
Yeah.
Like, if the value's in the bat, like, you could do some of those things, but, like, having any versatility to play first base, second base, even if you can't play third, you can if you can catch a little bit, you can have a little bit of that value anyway.
And that's something I'd be really interested to ask a Twins player development person about. Is we know at the major league level they value that positional flexibility. Guys like Willie Castro is beloved in the Twins clubhouse and also by Twin staff because you can just play him anywhere. But I do feel like there are examples. For example, Eddie Julien not getting reps in the minors at first base for the longest time, where could you open the door to those possibilities sooner with guys when the games really don't matter? It's the conversation we always have about pitchers, and maybe they were told to throw 30 changeups in a start no matter what, and the results are bad, but the process was what the organization wanted. And so I do wonder about that with Olivar. I don't know how much power and impact there's going to be to hold up a corner outfield spot, especially left field. And so I do think it makes sense potentially to try and find him get him reps somewhere else.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on. This guy's in a bucket by himself, and I think it's fair to say that this is the biggest surprise in the Twins system in 2024. And you know what, dude? I don't do this often, but I'm going to toot the Destination the Show horn because we were talking about this guy at the beginning of August. Talking about Peyton Eales, currently an infielder at AAA St. Paul, 24 years old, listed at 5'5", 180. He was signed out of independent ball after playing his college baseball at Coastal Carolina. Saw three or four levels this season. Started, I believe, at Fort Myers, went to Cedar Rapids, ended up in St. Paul. Here's his combined line across the entire season. 306, 435, 497. That's good for a 932 OPS. Struck out 14.5% of the time, walked 14.3% of the time. That's ridiculous. Stole bases at an 80% clip, 85% contact rate, super patient, just does not swing a lot, period. Chases 20%, that's not too much at all. 13% end zone whiff, so really good bat to ball skills. Just a really patient, solid approach. If you want to ding him for something, and this is off, let me give this caveat. This is off a small sample size at AAA. He does not hit the ball very hard. 362 expected WOBA. I went back and watched a video that we made about him on August 6th, which is 2 full months ago now. And we were like, Peyton Eales, incredible performance, still is kind of a feel-good story at this point.
100%.
Still a feel-good story or something more than that now that he's kind of kept this rolling all the way up to AAA.
So I'm going to make a prediction here.
Okay.
I think he gets drafted in the Rule 5 draft next month.
Oh, ooh, I like that.
Well, maybe early December. But I think that some team will look at his profile and say he hits the ball, puts the ball in play, he runs well, he can play multiple defensive positions, and takes a shot at him. And I just don't think the Twins have the room or the need to add him to the 40-man, right? When you have Julien, you have a whole bunch of third base options right now. You have Correa and you have Castro, and what you're going to do with Castro is an entirely different conversation. But to me, it's like
that's a $7 million price tag there, buddy.
I know, but I feel like if he gets added to the 40-man for the Twins, like that's gonna I'm gonna raise my eyebrows and wonder what they're thinking, because I just don't know that it's necessary. And I do think that he gets drafted by another team.
That's really interesting. Hadn't even considered that as a possibility, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, you know what? Here's the other thing. Maybe he's not even eligible because he literally just signed a contract. So maybe he's far away.
So right? Let's go down that road for a second, right? Though, of a 40-man spot, and let me ask you this, and then I will I also have somewhat of a Payne Eels take that it's not going to be as scorching hot as yours. Does the substandard performance of so many of the young Twins hitters in 2024 make him getting a shot in 2025 more likely? Right. So you brought up a bunch of guys, Brooks Lee and Miranda. Was he fully healthy? Who knows? But just like a bunch of the young pre-arb bats really had an outsized impact on the Twins' decline, I guess, at the end of 2024. Does any of the uncertainty created by those guys, Eddie Julien, we've talked about a number of times, make it more likely at all that Payne Eels gets a shot at some point next year?
I think it does. And I need to take back that prediction because he's not eligible.
Oh, boo.
He came from independent league. Like when I think of a 24-year-old, I'm like, okay, had an opportunity somewhere else, isn't on his first contract, got cut. But I mean, he bounced around and played at Coastal Carolina in 2023 and then played independent ball. So the Twins actually have a ton of time to decide what they want to do with him. So not needed to be added to the 40-man, not needed to be protected or anything. I could see him getting a shot at some point. I could see another team being interested in him, and the Twins kind of cashing that chip and moving him elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Just because, like I said, there's so much depth, and you put him on that roster, you're leapfrogging or burying him behind somebody, unless you're leapfrogging a guy like Brooks Lee. And I think there's too much invested in some of these other guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, to have the year that he had, it was a feel-good story. He was batting .331 at Fort Myers, and then plays 13 games in Cedar Rapids, and then goes and hits over 900 OPS for St. Paul. Like,
unbelievable. Yeah, and I saw him a couple of times at St. Paul, and he's incredibly athletic. He fields really, like, defensively really solid. I just want to highlight and double down on how insane it is that the Twins signed this guy out of independent ball, and it's not the first time this has happened. This is a practice that the Twins have down. So I want to heap some praise on those guys that are scouting independent ball, because Carson McCusker came from independent ball. I mean, there's just like a list of guys who continue to perform as they go up through the levels. And honestly, dude, this is just straight up height discrimination. Like, Payne Eels clearly is a baller. He has a skill set. I mentioned that he doesn't hit the ball that hard. He has the skills to get around that in his approach, right? If you're not going to hit the ball hard, you need to be super patient, not chase a ton, have good bat to ball skills, and especially in the zone. He has all of that stuff in place. And so credit to the Twins for finding him and giving him a shot.
What do I say I look at first?
Strikeouts and walks.
And he walked 67 times and struck out 68 times. And
unbelievable.
Still hit 12 home runs, 8 triples, 18 doubles, 41 stolen bases.
I gotta say it, dude. So I think he's gonna play at some point in the majors next year. Okay. I'm highly invested in seeing him get some at bats in Minneapolis.
And what's crazy is, we say, like, signed him out of the independent ball, like he was toiling in independent ball. Dude played all of 6 games.
Yeah. They're on it.
Hit 3 home runs, probably looked completely out of place. It shows him as 24, 4 years younger than the average. Like, he's playing with guys, and it was just way out of place, right? I mean, that's.
Dude, so let me throw you one last question on him, because I think he's so interesting, and you don't have to commit to this if you don't want to, because I'm putting you on the spot. Ballpark range of where he sits in your prospect rankings.
Probably late teens.
Agreed.
Because he is 24, right? And I say it all the time. Like, I err on the side of upside, and
that's fair.
There's limited upside. But as far as, like, rank guys in terms of how certain you are that they could hold their own in the majors,
Yep.
he'd be pretty high up on the list, right? Because he's done it at AAA for half of the season.
Let's put it a different way. You now have a guy who's we're agreeing is a top 20 prospect on your system who you didn't even have to draft. Didn't even draft him. Didn't draft him. Didn't sign him. Top 20 guy. Kind of, unbelievable, honestly.
Before you played a year at Coastal and was really good, played at Cedarville. The heck is Cedarville? Caesar's a Cedarville Yellow Jacket.
I don't know.
In the Great Midwest Athletic Conference. We live in the Midwest. I've never heard of that conference.
We'll find that out. That'll be our homework before next week. If anyone listening to this, and P.S., your take on him being drafted in Rule 5, you realize while people are listening to this episode, as soon as you say that, they're going to be yelling at their headphones. He can't be drafted in the Rule 5 draft.
Only there'll be just a couple of people that yell that immediately. One's going to be Seth. Seth will be like, dude, you're an idiot.
Yeah, there you go.
Everybody else will maybe panic and think that it's real and then maybe stop listening to the rest of the episode where I'm like, hold on, maybe because he's brand new.
We've lost credibility.
He's like this pop-up prospect. Like, where did he come from?
If you are listening to this and you know about anything about Cedarville and the what conference did you call it?
The Great Midwest Athletic Conference.
Hey, I am not above admitting when I don't know something about something. If you can give us an answer, tweet us at DTS_pod1 or destinationtheshow@gmail.com. We'll love an answer.
Funny thing, the other teams in this conference, it feels made up. The Trevecca Trojans, the Ashland Eagles, the Tiffin Dragons, the Walsh Cavaliers.
You're just saying words.
Kentucky Wesleyan Panthers. Kentucky Wesleyan sounds like something that is the stepbrother of the Ohio Wesleyan team.
That sounds like if you had like NCAA football video game, but you didn't have like the licensing agreement, and you had to have the schools be made up.
Here's this one. I thought it was Old Dominion. Nope, it's Ohio Dominican.
Nope. Okay, there you go. Cool.
Hillsdale Chargers, Findlay Oilers, Malone Pioneers, and the Lake Erie Storm.
We are seeking clarity on Cedarville. Please set us straight. We are struggling.
I've heard of none of those colleges ever. They all exist.
Okay. Next bucket of guys. We're going to the more recent debuts in the U.S. guys. So we're getting lower and lower down the system, which makes it more fun. It also makes it so that the information is harder to come by because it's just not publicly facing. So two guys we're going to talk about are Demiri Pena and Adrian Barroquez. And the two, I think, of the more intriguing recent or semi-recent international signee prospects who are now stateside. So we'll start with Pena, who's a hitter. He spent this summer in the Complex League, hit 282, 386, 410. That's good for a 796 OPS. 3 home runs, 8 extra base hits, 19 walks, and 9 strikeouts in 39 games as a 19-year-old. That after putting up a 949 OPS in the DSL as an 18-year-old. The skinny on Pena is this is probably an unfair label, a Luis Arraez-ish type hitter, right? Of like really outstanding bat to ball, hand-eye coordination, absolutely no pop in the bat. And so I was a little taken aback seeing 3 home runs and a little extra oomph when he came stateside this summer. So he's a really interesting one. Certainly not a big name signing, certainly not a big money signing. Jeremy, what do you make of his numbers coming stateside? Obviously, it's not quite the same level of production he put up in the DSL. Curious for your take on Pena from what he did this year.
His scouting report reads exactly like Luis Arraez would read if Luis Arraez was a little bit younger and right-handed. Right? Can he play defense? Maybe, but not real well. How does he run? he runs safely to first, right? Or walks safely to first. Can he throw? Not really, but give the guy a bat and he'll hit you safely. And it's not just when he came stateside that he started hitting in the
Oh yeah.
in the Dominican summer league. He batted 382. Like,
Yep.
it's like, this is insane. 382. He had almost 1,000 OPS and hit 0 home runs. Like,
Yep.
what are
That's
the chances?
crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's the lottery ticket where you hold on to this guy. He doesn't have the super loud tools that the Fernando Tatis had, or, and not that he was he was a part of a trade for what, Shields, was it? Like,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
on. But I think there's a lot of stuff to like, and when you have good prospects above him and young guys in the major league on the major league roster already, like, there's not a lot of pressure on him to develop into something, but he very well could.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what starts to make these organizations really, really deep. So I would guess, when teams are calling to talk trade, this is a name that comes up, like, hey, maybe if we can't come to an agreement and the Twins have to throw something in, this is a guy that they're going to ask about, because if you can add a hitter, you're never going to have too many guys that can just rake.
Yep.
And it's crazy because, like, Luis Arraez, who that's a lofty comparison, has been
It
traded.
is a lofty comparison. That's why I was like reticent to make it, honestly.
But he's been traded twice. He's played
Mhm.
for 3 different teams in the last 3 years. And so we say there's not, you can never have too many hitters, but the best hitter, like, not power hitter,
Like pure hitter.
like,
Best hit tool. How about?
the guy with potentially the best hit tool in the world, and teams are like, yeah, we'll trade him. And so that's what's weird. So, good for Pena for getting his name recognized in the DSL, and then coming stateside and getting it done.
Yep.
And where does he end up defensively? Who knows? But his best position is in the batter's box.
Yep. Do not care. So he is, Jeremy. Well, I'm going to deem him like the lower level hitter to keep an eye on. Guessing he starts 2025 at Fort Myers. I think if he continues to hit, right, as a 20-year-old in the Florida State League, you can start getting a little bit more excited about the possibilities. Because again, that's going to be a big step up from the complex league. The other guy we're going to talk about, who's like the pitching equivalent of the, like, if you want to buy a lottery ticket, this is the one that I would personally be buying from the lower levels. Adrian Barroquez, he is 19, 6'1", 190, and he made his Fort Myers debut in 2024. Only 16.1 innings pitched, right? So always a caveat of small sample size, but 2.20 ERA, 2.63 FIP, struck out over 30% of, struck out 31% of batters. He did walk too many. That's the challenge at the moment, right? So walked 15% of guys. That's a lot. Only threw 61% strikes. You want to be like 66 and higher. But there's so many traits to like here for a 19-year-old arm. Four seamers up to 97 miles per hour already. Really good shape. I want to say like 17-ish inches of induced vertical break as an average. Also has slider, curve, and a changeup. Like, his pitch break chart is really pretty. He absolutely has an affinity for spin. His curveball was hitting 3,000 RPMs. It's like a real hammer, just like a ton of drop. This is the kind of guy that I get unreasonably excited about. And I want you to tell me if that's fair based on 16 innings at low A as a 19-year-old.
As a 19-year-old, that looks like he's maxed out physically. Right. So I mean, there's a difference between looking at a guy like Charlie Soto and being like, okay, here's what he does right now at age 18 or 19 with projection left. And I don't know that that's a thing with Bojas. I think what you see now is basically what he's going to be. Like he's kind of got that stocky build already, which is not, I don't think, very common with 19-year-olds. Like he could be, like, he could have, when you max out there, like, is there more to the fastball? Like, you could, if
how much more do you how much more do you need?
right?
If
But
you're going to be a starter, though, you know what I'm saying? Like,
correct, you don't. But like, what more are we going to get out of him? Like with Soto, he throws it, and you're like, and the guy hasn't even, like, he's still a boy.
He
Right?
also doesn't look like he tries what he throws, which is
Right.
crazy.
So for me, that's kind of where it is, and I think ultimately he's probably, despite his pitch mix, is probably more likely to be a relief pitcher. And so, I mean, if you start throwing a bunch of strikes and you stop walking guys, like, there's the makings of a starter there.
Yeah.
But he doesn't look. He looks like he probably stood on the mound, and you've got these 17, 18-year-old guys that are, pimply faced, and then you got this dude that looks like a grown man. So I think there's a little bit there to remember. When it comes to projection, and if you're 19 and you're maxed out, it's maybe not. There's not a lot of projection left.
That's fair, and as you say, right? Like, if he doesn't throw more strikes, there you have absolutely no shot at sticking as a starter anyway. And so my guess would be that he spends all of 2025, which would be what, his age 20 season, all of 2025 at Fort Myers. There's absolutely no reason to rush him. Being there as a 20-year-old still makes him very young for that level. I want to say the average pitcher in low A is 22, maybe. So he's well ahead of the age curve. And I agree. Like, if he's throwing like 65, 66% strikes, that potentially opens up some more doors. But he's my lottery ticket in terms of a guy who we haven't talked about a ton, like Charlie Soto or Dason Hill, right? We've talked about those guys a lot.
Roquez is a guy. They're all about the same age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bohorquez is 19 and a half. Soto just turned 19. Dason Hill is not yet 19. Dylan Quested just turned 20. So I mean,
about Dylan Quested, dude.
They all fit kind of in that same age range. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly, he's a prospect. He's someone to watch. I find there to be less upside there because of, you look at him, you're like, okay, yep, doesn't look like he's 19. But
you're not fun. Okay. Pena and Roquez, stock up, stock down, stock the same for each of those guys. Then we'll do two more and
stock up for both, right? You make it stateside and you get it done. Yep. You immediately, the stock is up for both for you. That's what you do.
I also have to say, and I do feel like we've talked about this quite a bit, the number of guys that we said stock up for feels homerish on the last 4 episodes of this podcast. I think we said stock down for like 3 guys. And we've covered like 20 to 25 prospects in depth.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? Erod was hurt.
Schobel was one.
Schobel for sure.
DeAndrade was out for the season.
Yep. Rosario for me, stock down.
Hey, he's busy mashing home runs in the AFL.
Severino for me, stock down. I mean, there's guys that are stock down. That's just how it works.
Okay, let's talk about 2 more guys. We're heading to the Dominican, my friend. We're going to talk about the 2 headliners in terms of money. The 2 headliners from the most recent international class, that is Deiber de los Santos and Eduardo Beltre. We'll dig into their numbers in a second. Should caveat and say that there are a ton of other interesting prospects in the DSL that the Twins have to check out. These are the 2 we're going to cover because they're the most famous. They're the biggest bonus signees. So we'll start with Deiber de los Santos, shortstop, 17 this summer in the Dominican Summer League. These are some like comical numbers. both good and bad. He had 301, 384, 460. What is that? Like a
8.4.
Yeah, there you go. 5 home runs, 17 extra base hits, stole 17 bases, walked 18 times, struck out 63 times in 47 games.
Yeah,
that's
tough.
Some strikeouts. Tough. Eduardo Beltre, an outfielder, also was 17 in the DSL. He just turned 18 about a week ago. One of the better performers in the DSL in all of baseball this summer. He hit 326, 453, 618. That's good for a 1.023 OPS, 11 home runs, 20 extra base hits, 28 walks, and 43 Ks in 43 games. So you can opt out of this conversation altogether, Jeremy, if you want, and say, I don't talk about guys until they make it stateside. Or if you want, I'll take, because you're an upside guy. So I'm curious what your read on both of these guys is. Obviously, De Los Santos, a ton of strikeouts. Beltre, just like unbelievable video game type numbers. What do you make of their performances?
De Los Santos playing shortstop a majority of his games is valuable. The strikeouts are alarming.
Almost comical.
They're both gonna get their chance to now move to Fort Myers and see what happens. And so I think, I mean, you put a bunch of money into dudes, and if they perform, if you can find any silver, even if it's a silver lining, right? You take that. You're not looking for silver linings with either of these guys because they're batting 300 and they're getting on base 38% of the time, and they're stealing bases, and they're drawing walks, but they're also striking out, one more than the other. So I think for me, it's like they're both guys that would make my top 30 because you don't pay. I mean, it's like investing a first round pick, right? When you invest that much into someone, you see that value. And so I would put them both in the top 30, towards the second half of it. I think you're more excited about Beltre because he does things or did things in the DSL that you just don't typically see, like 11 home runs.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's you have to try and hold. In my opinion, you have to try and hold multiple things true at the same time. Which is, it's okay to look at his production and say that's not normal. Like, you're gonna get guys who produce in the DSL. This is exceptional production, and it's also good to say we shouldn't get too excited about this beyond the confines of this year. Now you need to prove it when you come stateside and play in the FCL. He missed a little bit of time from injury at the very beginning of the DSL season. It's just hard to ignore that level of production. He was on an absolute heater all summer, did not slow down. And so, right, he's the type of guy who's gone from, he's just another kind of lottery ticket, another guy on the outside of the system looking into, well, if he does that again next summer, you're talking about potentially someone who's, really high impact and, this is the route that superstars are made. I'm not saying Eduardo Beltre is going to be a superstar, right? But you have guys that are signed from the Dominican. They blow up, they pop, they come stateside, they continue to do it. A lot of the best players in the game have kind of traveled that path to get where they are now. And so it's hard not to see numbers like Beltre's and say, wow, he's a guy that we should certainly keep our eye on in 2025.
Well, and for context, like, the league average is 238, 365, 336, 701. Like, it's there was a couple of guys for the one of the Dodgers teams that hit a bunch of home runs. Strikeouts in the league, there was 14,000 walks and 22,000 strikeouts. There's significantly more strikeouts. And the average age is 17 years old. So it's all about projection, and there's so much to kind of unpack that if guys are getting it done, you take notice of that, and
Hmm.
then feel confident that you spent your money wisely, and then you move them forward to the next year.
Yep. But I think, my summary on these guys, and the Twins very much have lived in this realm of, we're going to sign a bunch of the middle tier, right? And so we're not signing a guy for $5 million. We're going to sign three guys that cost between $1 and $2 million, then a bunch more guys. Both De Los Santos and Beltre passed the test of DSL, right? Albeit with warts on profiles that you're going to see in any 17-year-old hitter. Did a great job. Look forward to seeing them both in the complex league next season. Certainly going to be two guys to keep an eye on. So how do you assess stock for DSL guys? I'm almost like, no, don't bother with the stock, but stock up, stock down, or stock the same for both of these guys.
I mean, if you go in there and bat 0-4-0, your stock's down, right?
Sure,
You go in there
that's true.
and bat 80 points higher than league average,
Mm-hmm.
your stock is definitely up. But I think the expectation was probably that they should go there and perform. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at a minimum, your stock's not down. You're looking at two guys that probably fit into the back of the top 30, with the ability to climb much higher. So I think you are happy with the investment that you made, and let's see what happens when they get to the States.
There you go. Things to look forward to in 2025. Okay, going to finish off with a listener question here, and then we'll just preview guests that we have coming up in our next two episodes. So this question came via email. I love getting questions via email. If you want to ask a question for us to put on the show, and we will put the call out for questions the next couple of weeks because we have great guests coming on. There's a number of ways that you can go about that. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. You can shoot either myself or Jeremy a message or a tweet. You can email us at destinationshow@gmail.com. We love getting questions and talking prospects. So here's a question. If Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, and Luke Keeschel are the Twins' top hitting prospects, who are you ranking at 4, 5, and 6? Now, the question did not specify who are you ranking as 4th, 5th, and 6th hitters. So I took this to be, who are your next guys up in the system, period.
Ooh,
How
I
are
said
you?
to get the opposite.
Okay. Well, maybe we can both answer it our own way, and then we'll reconcile.
Okay.
You want to go first?
I feel like they're both good questions. Like either one,
They are.
they're good questions because I think not necessarily in that order, but they are the top three prospects.
So
right?
I rearranged it when I read the question to say Jenkins, Erod, and Keeschel, which I think is the correct order.
Correct. Okay. So they're not only the top three prospects, they're also the top three hitting prospects. So two different questions. I want to hear what you think first.
Okay, hold on. I have a list because I've been working on some prospect things that are coming soon to websites near you.
Love to hear it.
Okay, here's who I'm thinking about in the next chunk of guys. You want to do hitters or just prospects, period?
Let's do prospects, period.
Prospects, period, guys 4 through 10. I'm pretty locked in on Kalen Culpepper at 4.
Okay.
And then 5 through 10, guys that I'm weighing and thinking about. Marco Raya is in that group. Andrew Morris is in that group. Gabriel Gonzalez is begrudgingly in that group. So I got to put him somewhere. Charlie Soto is in that group for me. And CJ Culpepper is also in that group for me.
Okay.
Which I realize I'm potentially the high guy on him. I think that is my cluster in the 4 through 10 range that I'm thinking about. Okay. Or the 5 through 10 range, with Kalen Culpepper being the 4th best hitting prospect.
Okay. So I think we're mostly...
Give me your rebuttal.
I think we're mostly aligned there. One name that you didn't mention that I would put in the top 10 is Kyle DeBarge.
Yeah.
I do think that he's definitely in the top 3 hitters, not necessarily in the top 3 prospects.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think for me, the next 3 would be in some order: um, Culpepper, Raya, and either Morris or Soto.
Yeah.
Um, that would be my 4, 5, 6, 7. I would probably. So I said Culpepper,
He's
then
like this is great podcasting. Jeremy is live writing down his Twins top
yeah.
prospect
Well,
list.
I think DeBarge would probably be my 8,
Hmm.
but that doesn't, because I'm like, I need a third hitter, and I think I'm a little bit. I Gonzalez is who, the guy that we kind of talked about, and you were not real high on him. He didn't do a whole lot.
I like
Uh,
Kyle DeBarge a lot more than Gabriel Gonzalez. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely, but that third hitter,
Mm.
right? I would maybe put Winokur there, like Winokur and Gonzalez, kind of in that same tier. Um, but then you could make that argument for, like you mentioned, in that bucket. It's any of those guys.
Yeah.
If DeAndrade wasn't hurt, I would have him there.
I do think the challenge of answering this question a little bit is to me there's a little bit of a drop off actually, right? So we
Which
easily
makes it a great
bucket,
question.
yeah, which makes it a great question. We easily bucket these top three. They're all top 100 prospects. Jenkins and Erod are top. Jenkins is the top 5 prospect, top 10 at worst. Erod is the top 25 prospect, right? I do think after you get past Culpepper, Raya, Morris, then there's like maybe another half step down, maybe DeBarge. Then there's another kind of half step down before the next chunk of guys you get to. So
So who are your top 3 hitting prospects, and in what order? Just curious.
I will.
Or
What you
pitching
mean the
prospect,
top the
pitching
oh
prospect.
pitching? I would probably have to go. Morris first. If we're assuming Zebby has graduated, which I think he has.
Yep.
Morris, Raya, Soto, then CJ Culpepper.
Okay. And I think that's fair. And really, it's what are you going to value more? You're going to value the floor that Morris has that's much higher,
Right.
or the upside that Soto has that's much higher. And I think that there's the 3 guys are completely different. You
Right.
have the one end of the spectrum where Morris is knocking on the door. You have the other end where Soto is far, far away, and then you have Raya as kind of the happy medium. And I think Raya probably has the highest probability to reach a higher ceiling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than Morris or than Soto.
Dude, I'm excited to actually have this like top 20 debate with you a little bit later in the off season. Yeah, I used certainty as a separator with Morris because I'm locked in on him as like having enough starter traits, whereas Raya, there's still some unknowns, right? Of like third time through the order, pitch count beyond 75, and then
Sure.
Soto, I mean, flashes of absolute dominance this season, and also he
Looking
had a
well.
start where it was 1 inning and he walked 6 guys, and
Yeah.
he's probably going to start next season at not Fort Myers, Cedar Rapids. So there's still a ways to go there.
So I would probably say Raya is my top pitching prospect. Um,
I think that's fair.
but by the time we do this, I'll probably say Connor Priebus my top pitching prospect.
Oh, here, so that's actually another interesting wrinkle, right? And we can wrap it up here in a second, but I think if you fast forward to the middle of next summer and Charlie Soto is cruising at Cedar Rapids, then it's a very different conversation, right?
Right.
Because if he starts to dominate when he moves to high A and he's still going to be what just turned 20 in high A, that's then a combination of like starting to establish track record plus stuff plus frame, all of the things that you're looking for that make you a little more confident about his
Correct.
long-term outlook.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, we are done, dude. We're actually done recapping the Twins 2024 farm system. 4 episodes. We spent 4 hours talking about that. We have guests, Jeremy, next 2 weeks. Next week, we are going to be joined for I guess we'll call it like a Twins content crossover. We're going to have Tom Froming on to get his thoughts, to get his takes, kind of the OG of Twins YouTube and video content. So we did this last year at the end of the season and wrapped up the Twins farm system with him. So that should be incredibly fun. And then 2 weeks from now, pending any changes of plans, Jonas Lovin joining us from the Cedar Rapids co-pitching coach for 2024 is going to be here, and we are going to ask him about a whole bunch of Twins minor league pitchers. You already told us we can take as long as we need and ask as many questions as we have. So really excited to dig in on guys, Prelip, Zebby, all the guys that he's worked with over the past year or so. So we'll have guests the next 2 weeks. Look out for those episodes. Until then, thank you guys so much for supporting the show. We will catch you next week. Take it easy.